Living in America as a black person, you recognize there is one set of laws for you and one set of laws for those, especially in the white community. In our book, Passive Aggressive Racism in the System of White Supremacy, I take you through times in my life when I first started noticing white supremacy. We teach you how to recognize it, identify it, and also counter it in our book. This book is a beginner's course for those that are just starting to wake up and open their eyes to see the system of white supremacy. As a black American person, you must understand this system because this system is life or death to you. How you handle it, how you deal with it, it can affect your mental health if you don't understand this system. Pick up our book, Passive Aggressive Racism and the System of White Supremacy, today on Amazon.
The incredible escaped slave who turned nurse during the American Civil War. Historians say that she had a one-of-a-kind, extraordinary life. Born into slavery in North Carolina in April 1838, Lucy Higgs Nichols was sold to the Higgs family of Tennessee and was handed down to members of that family. In the long run, she became the property of Willie and Prudence Higgs, who owned a farm near Grace Creek in Tennessee. While at the Grace Creek, Lucy married fellow slave George Higgs and gave birth to a daughter named Mona. In July 1863, a Union encampment near the Higgs plantation compelled the Higgs to move their slaves to Atlanta. And thanks to this, Lucy was able to flee with the daughter and husband. It is not exactly known how her husband escaped, but what is documented is that Lucy and her daughter Mona ran through the bushes during the Civil War and until they reached the Union camp of the 23rd Indiana Regiment. They were accepted by the Indiana 23rd, which I should mention was a group of Civil War soldiers mustered out of the southern Indiana areas. At the time, enslaved men and women usually sought asylum with Union troops, as runaway slaves were seen to be as contraband of war and could not be returned to their masters. So Lucy, who found freedom and safety with the 23rd Indiana Regiment, started working with Dr. Magnus Bracker, the regiment sergeant. She learned how to tend to soldiers who were dying or wounded. She followed the regiment to the siege of Vicksburg, where she cared for the wounded by dressing the wounds of the soldiers and administering medicine in various ways. She also worked as a cook and servant and became known as Aunt Lucy by the soldiers who loved her being around. But while at Vicksburg, Lucy lost her daughter Mona and she was buried by the soldiers. She had at the time already lost her husband in the battle. The former slave turned Civil War nurse joined George William Tecumseh Sherman at Atlanta. It is reported that Lucy was sometimes at the rear, sometimes in the front, and often in the thickest of the battle, as much as a soldier. Her male companions, except that she did not carry arms, but she never received a single scratch during the battle. In 1865, when the regiment mustered out of Roosevelt, many of the soldiers went back home to New Albany, Indiana. Lucy settled there as well, working in the homes of many of the soldiers before getting married to John Nichols, a Civil War veteran who had served with the 8th U.S. Cold Heavy Artillery. Lucy received invitations to every reunion of the 17th Army Corps and was a fixture in Memorial Day exercises at the National Soldiers Cemetery in New Albany. There is a well-known photograph of Lucy where she stands surrounded by the 22nd Indiana Volunteer Infantry Regiment and other soldiers. That photograph was taken shortly after she was made the honorary female member of the Albany Army of the Republic. Not just in that local past, but nationally. She was made like known nationally all over. The Grand Army of the Republic was a fraternal organization of veterans of the Union Army. It did not only make Lucy the only female member, but helped her fight for a government pension for her work as a military nurse. Compensation for nurses was at the time rare, no matter one's race. Nurses were only able to receive a pension after the Civil War, but they had to prove their service in war with documents which many of them lacked. None of them had the documents. Like if you look into the history of how Lucy joined the army, getting people to confirm their service was also a bit difficult. However, Lucy had the backing of her fellow veterans who petitioned the Congress for her pension. In 1898, after 6 years of applying for pension and being denied, Lucy was granted a pension of only $12 per month as a special act of Congress. This development appeared in newspapers across the US. After the recognition of her act of valor, Lucy passed away on January 5th, 1919 in a very poor health and alone. She outlived her husband, John Nicole, and several others of the soldiers, and was buried in the military honors in Colored Cemetery next to her husband. In 2019, a sculpture depicting Lucy freeing slavery with her daughter was dedicated in the grounds of historic Secondary Baptist Church in New Albany. The church is known for being a link in the Underground Railroad. And that is the story of an escaped slave who turned denounced during the American Civil War. Let me know what you think, especially the part of her death in a very poor health and alone, and for the fact of being given $12 as pension per month. What can you do with $12, if I may ask? Let me know in the comment section. My name is Osie The Born Child, and until then, I'll be seeing you, dear brothers and sisters, in another video. Thanks for watching, for subscribing and supporting the African Diaspora News channel.